and I really, really appreciate it. And on behalf of BlackNSA, I want to have us really start our mentorship call for today. We meet the first Thursday of each month. This month, we have the pleasure of having Susan Lindner as our mentor, who's going to be sharing some words of wisdom with us and sharing a little bit about her background, her story, and how she's become successful. She's going to provide us with some salient points that the attendees, can take away, and hopefully it can ignite and generate some ideas to enhance your respective businesses and building your respective brands. I know I met Susan about 2 or 3 years ago at the first millionaire mastermind that we had with Black NSA that I participated with Black NSA, and Susan did a phenomenal job of leading that group. And that was my first introduction to Susan. And since then, I've seen a lot of the work that she's done, and she's well respected, not only here in the United States, but globally. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Susan Lindner. And let Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much for having me in that very kind introduction. Um, I will say this. I mean, I think a lot of us, didn't come out of school and then immediately assume we were going to become speakers. Although there used to be a track in NSA for youth speakers, like kids were anywhere from 8 to 14 who were becoming professional speakers while they were still in school. But I think for most of us, we applied our adult learnings to our speaking life. And so that was the case for me. I had never intended to become a professional speaker. I'm an anthropologist by training. I was an anthropology and religion major in college, and I can still remember my dad's uh, GP telling him that his daughter had bought certainly a one-way ticket to the poorhouse with that decision to study anthropology and religion. Um, and he wasn't wrong initially. I decided to pursue a career in public health my first 10 years out of college, and I worked in HIV all over the world. And I spent 3 years living in Thailand, working in brothels, doing AIDS education with sex workers and their customers. So I'm sure you've all met a lot of people who have worked in brothels before, pretty typical. But my nickname was Condom Girl. And I used to go jogging in the morning and hand out condoms in the market to the farmers where I worked. I was in very rural Thailand, and at the time, 1 in 6 sexually active people were HIV positive, and there are about 3 AIDS funerals a day where I lived. So that had a really compelling impact on me, and unbeknownst to me, it would be the trigger for the basis of my speaking career now. I learned as a public health professional and an aid worker that the story that was being told, and I'm an innovation storyteller, that's the name of my company, um, that the story that public health workers were telling at the time was get AIDS and die. There's no other choice. You get AIDS and die, or use a condom and live. And that was it. And the campaigns that were used at the time were really terrifying. And surprisingly, that was a really effective campaign. It was a really effective campaign for about 6 month intervals. And I'm sure you can remember during the COVID times, right? That we all thought, okay, if I just mask, if I just wash my fruit and vegetables with soap for some reason, right, we're all going to be okay. This is going to be a limited time. We'll have to do this. And then we're going to change our behavior, and then we can go back to the way things have always been.
Lines of service and enter your Medicare, Medicaid, or state ID as required.
I
If you
think,
are a provider, you must also
Mary, if you could go on mute, that would be great. I think that might be
Yes, thank you.
thanks. Thank you. Um, so in any event, I just found the story that public health professionals were telling to slow the spread of HIV wasn't working. And I realized that we had to change the storytelling in order to get people to change their behavior for their own benefit. Really, it was a life and death story situation to get them to change their behavior for good. And so I started to adopt all different kinds of anthropological principles to storytelling to get people to look at themselves differently and get them to embrace a different way of living in order to live. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, but my path to becoming a professional speaker was started in the brothels of Thailand, but came many years later when I was working with startups. I got after 10 years of working in HIV, my last job was at the Centers for Disease Control, tracking variant and resistant strains of HIV coming into the United States. I just got really burned out. And at the time, there was this thing called the internet that sounded pretty impressive. I had an AOL account, so naturally I thought I was ready to go to dive into this economy. And I started doing PR for tech startups. Um, I opened my own agency 2 years later, and then grew that agency, and then rebranded and started a social media agency when PR was on its downshift and social media was on the upturn. And this last piece of the work I'm doing now is called Innovation Storytellers. And the way I got into speaking was I was using speaking as a marketing tool to attract new startup clients to my agency so I could bring them in as retainer PR and social media clients. And that was super wonderful and worked fantastically well as a marketing tool. I would go to speak to tech accelerators and incubators where startups hung out. I'm a New Yorker, I'm based in New York City. So I got to befriend all of the consulates here in New York. And every so often, pretty much every 2 quarters, countries would bring over tours of startups to check out the New York ecosystem to bring their companies to the US market. And I would be the first person they would meet. And I would teach them how to sell and create marketing messages specifically for the US market. And that's where my anthropology degree came in, is really figuring out how to adapt culture to ours so that you could really make a difference here in this market. So after a while, I spoke to 600 companies over that time, trying to get new clients into my agency. And over time, I found that I enjoyed speaking to them more than I enjoyed servicing them once they signed up as clients. And I thought, I think I want to do this full time. I think I want to do this speaking thing. I have to tell you, I spoke to those companies for free. So if there's any advice that I can offer you on this mentorship call is don't speak to 600 companies for free. You don't have to do it the hard way like I did. I did use it as marketing and get some compensation, but boy, I'm sure there's a way to shorten that learning curve. I genuinely did not know that public speaking was a profession outside of former presidents and astronauts and folks like that. I thought, what does a humble marketer know to become a professional speaker? Over time, I began asking people for money for those talks, and they said, oh, yeah. So my first encounter was speaking at the Belgian American Chamber of Commerce, clearly everyone's target market, right? And in the audience was a woman from GE, from General Electric Ventures. She was Belgian. And at the end of the conversation, she said, you know, we could really use this kind of thinking at GE. And I said, really? Does GE have a budget? I worked up the courage to say. And she looked at me like I had 12 heads, like I was the biggest idiot on the planet. She was like, yeah, GE has some money. And I was like, okay. So sure enough, I actually had to go and audition in front of the group of the senior level learning and development executives at their corporate campus in New York. And I had no idea what I was going to say. I gave the pitch, I gave the talk that I thought they would want to hear. A lot of it was invented the night before because I'd never spoken to a corporate audience before. It was all startups, guys in hoodies and sweatpants. And I got to the end, and the head of learning and development looks at me and said, that was perfect. Don't change a thing. And I couldn't remember what I said. It was like this. So I walked back to my car. I opened the door to my car. My husband called me and said, how did it go? No joke. I threw up all over the sidewalk. I had been so nervous before going into that event. He's like, are you okay? I was like, I got it. I was just so overwhelmed. So that is my first foray into corporate speaking. And they wound up hiring me and sending me to Zambia. That was my first engagement with GE to talk to the second tier of senior leaders in all of GE Global, who were coming on a learning and evaluation expedition to Zambia. They brought leaders from around the world to be considered for elevation to C-level positions across the organization. And I was the final speaker to help them wrap up what they were going to go back to their offices and tell their teams about everything they had learned from their 2 weeks in Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. So that was my task. So that speaking engagement, and I'll tell you one more, the night before I was set to speak, my very first corporate speaking engagement, my client leans over, we're at dinner the night before, and she says, I just got a call from the CEO of GE Africa. He was supposed to join us around 1 o'clock right after your workshop ends, but he's not going to maybe be able to make it until dinner. Do you think you can add about 3 hours of content to your talk before he comes for dinner? It's now 7:30. I have had a glass of wine, and I have never given a corporate talk before. I said, absolutely, not a problem. I stayed up all night making slides, finding images, hoping that the internet stayed up in the middle of dark. I mean, when I say darkest Africa, I mean it. Like I was the only light on in the hotel, trying to make this presentation work. Slept through my alarm the next morning. Someone was knocking on my door with a golf cart, waiting to take me to the ballroom, literally putting on my pantyhose on the back of a golf cart because in 2017, we wear pantyhose in Africa. I don't know. This is my first experience. So I'll share this with you. I'll stop here. That was my first experience of corporate speaking. I had no idea what I was doing. I was asked to do things on the fly that I never thought possible. And they invited me back 5 more times, both in the US, in Zambia, in Africa, and other parts of Africa, and in India to speak to their most senior leaders in the organization. So clearly the content was spot on. It was me who had to realign and readjust. So that was the beginning of what I would call my speaking business, but I didn't know anything about the business of speaking. So I'm happy to share with you where it's gone since then. That was 2017. We're almost 10 years later. And I will tell you, without a doubt, the biggest impact that anything has had on my speaking career is the BlackNSA $1 Million Mastermind. I can tell you that just being surrounded by peers who were like-minded and like-hearted had the greatest impact on me on helping to formulate who I wanted to be as a speaker, what my values would be as a speaker, and how to reach out to other people for help, because clearly I was in need of help in formulating all of that. That experience of being in BlackNSA helped me create a one-pager, a website, to meet with other people to help me figure out what my fees should be, and to figure out how to find the next speaking gig, which is probably the most important part for all of us, is where's the next gig, right? Where's the next client, and how do I foster relationships with them? So GE was a great starting off point because it was such a marquee client that when I name dropped GE, everyone's like, oh, okay. That was the 600 startups prior, not so much.
Wow, that's amazing. I really, really enjoyed hearing that. And so I know that you're going to continue on, but I just wanted to throw a question in as you are sharing. What would you say the main reason why you got invited back so many times? Now, from your perspective, you were saying, well, you wasn't really sure, what message resonated the most. Were you ever given some feedback as to why you were continually asked back? Because there had to be something that led you to continue growing and continue making an impact.
Well, Jason, you and I both know as supermodels, right, that we exist from our looks alone to get started, and then the personality shines through after. Part of it, I think was a very fresh perspective And I think it's something that speakers forget is the reason that we're hired as outsiders to come inside is because sometimes the message doesn't resonate when people are already telling their teams what we might be telling, but a fresh voice is really helpful. And our fresh non-corporate perspective is exactly what is needed to wake people up. So my background of having worked in brothels, I can tell you to this day, there's always someone at 8:30 in the morning who is hearing me describe my experiences as condom girl at 8:30 in the morning going, okay, does anyone from HR know that this lady is talking about sex work in the boardroom right now? And it's a wake-up call, right? So within the first 3 to 5 slides, I am talking about sex, religion, and politics pretty quickly. That has a sense of waking people up, but also bringing people together. My intention is not to alienate people, but rather there's so many things that unite us that, having spoken with a global audience, and being an anthropologist, I'm always going to bring everybody into a sense of inclusion in the room. What I really want to say to that guy who's looking around for the HR person is, didn't I see you in Bangkok in that brothel I was working at down in the red light district? Didn't I think you look so familiar, but I don't do that. But but there are those moments. I also work very closely with the clients to make sure I get feedback from them of what worked and what didn't. And so where I'm lingering too long on something, for example, or where I could have gone deeper in my workshop, that's really helpful stuff. And I think being really responsive to the client and saying, I heard you, I changed it, I got it. I will say, when I went back the next year to Zambia, different group of participants, two things happened. Number one, the client pulled me aside after and said, you didn't tell that joke that we heard last year about X. And I was like, I thought I should keep it fresh, change it up. She goes, no, that was a really good joke. You should tell it every time. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that I could do that. I also do stand up and improv just for fun and to keep myself absolutely insane on a regular basis, because it's so stressful, but joyful too. So I learned that humor was a really big part of my talks. And I just think of it as part of my personality, but it really was a differentiator from other speakers who were all serious all the time. So that was a plus. And the other thing that happened the next time is that we lost power. We were in a windowless conference room the second year, and we lost power throughout the organization, and I had a PowerPoint deck. And so thankfully, I knew my slides backward and forward. We opened a door to get sunlight into the room. I had a giant Post-it board next to me, and I literally drew out my slides on that Post-it board because we had no power. It was pitch black in my conference room. And then we shifted to outside and wound up doing exercise outside. So I think the other part of that is, am I flexible enough to adapt on the fly? And my improv training, and I think just being a really awful procrastinator and doing things at the very last minute allows me to respond on the fly to things that meeting planners who always have 100 plates spinning really rely on someone who can be responsive and reactive in the moment and really respond to what they need. That you keep it cool even when the lights go out. I think you're on mute, Jason.
So I say, yeah, that's great feedback, and certainly, a big takeaway that I get from you, what you're saying is that sometimes you don't necessarily know how to approach matters. However, being someone who's flexible and being someone that can think out the box and being someone, because sometimes you just have to pivot. All
Yeah,
right.
no
And
choice.
like the example you said that where you had to come with 3 additional hours of content because someone else wasn't able to be there. It
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot to be able to do that and be able to do it successfully. So definitely hats off to you in regards to that. Um, so does anyone else have any questions for Susan? I know she's still presenting, but I think maybe just to have some engagement, we
Right.
can have some other
Uh,
questions maybe.
so in my business, you have to shift and learn and be able to move on the spot. In speaking, do you ever find out that the subject matter changes midstream via a question or anything that will cause you to shift, or do you normally want to stay on your topic?
Hmm.
Because sometimes I find out that when you shift, the conversation or the entertainment goes a different way. So you have a certain subject matter, but via questions and reactions, do you sometimes have to go a different direction that takes you out of your subject matter and stay out of your subject matter
Hmm.
in the shifting?
Yeah, I mean, I try to bring it back to, what I'm asked to speak on. I can recall I was in New Jersey, speaking with an association of IT professionals, senior level IT professionals. And I got to the end of my talk, and a guy stood up and said, thank you so much for joining us here today. I want to tell you why I think your entire approach is all wrong.
Hmm.
And that was his opener. And I was like, immediately, I was like, all right, let's go. Like, I'm
Yeah.
so ready for this. Let's go. Um, he goes, I might not know anything, but I've just been in this business of selling IT for the last 20 years, and the stories that you're saying that we should tell don't work at all. And I was like, wow. I could feel like the hair on my neck standing up. And I said, so tell us a little bit about what you think works. And I thought, where can I find my framework already living in his story? But he
Mhm.
just wants to make a point. And so the going off track thing, like I tried to take a step back and say, what is this person really trying to accomplish in driving us to a place? Like, is this ego? Is this, who he is in front of his peers here in this association? Do I have something to learn from this person's approach that I hadn't previously considered? And I said, I said, I'm so glad we're here in this learning space. I'd love to know what works for you. Can you share a little bit more? Right. So that was taking the edge off. In terms of going in a completely different direction, I try to keep it light and say, it sounds like you really have a handle on X, right? Which is that thing over here that you want to drag me to. I don't know how to make you a sandwich, but the one thing I do know how to do is tell a great innovation story. So I could really help you with that, but perhaps there's someone else who could help you with why that I can't. I was like, please don't ask me to make you a sandwich though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That's perfect. But you said you did comedy and stand-up. I'm sure your heckler control was about to pop in at some
Oh,
point,
so
right?
hard. So hard. Dr. Henrik, I can't even tell you. I was just like, oh yeah, let's go. And we're doing this over dinner. These guys have had a couple of glasses of wine. I was like, oh, okay, got it. I really want to say, I know this is a conversation you want to have with your wife, but you can have it with me. That's okay.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
Susan, you bring up a point, and I wanted you to maybe expound upon it because I know in business and when you're presenting, sometimes it's a saying that says, facts will tell something about what it is that you want to learn about a product or service. But when you tell a story, then you really sell to the client that they're ready to buy based on that story. So
Mhm.
if you could maybe show a comparison between storytelling in business and then storytelling from your innovative perspective, right? Is there a difference or is there similarities or
Mhm.
maybe you could expound upon that?
Yeah. So I'm really glad you brought that up. One of the things that we learned in the Million Dollar Mastermind is, Anne McNeil, our mentor in chief, tells us, you have to niche to be rich. And I thought, okay, I'm a pretty good storyteller. And then I did a Google search on books published about storytelling, and it was like bajillion. I get email marketing from my dentist that says, I'm a storyteller. And I was like, damn it, Dr. Bodie, it's only because I have so much gauze in my mouth that I can't respond that you get to tell me stories, right? But everyone's a storyteller these days. And I thought, how do I stand out in this market? And it was really fascinating. I thought, okay, I have worked with innovative people, right? Tech founders who have created two Neds in a shed who have created some cool new piece of software that they think is going to change the world. And I thought, okay, I know how to deal with this population across industries, maybe better than anyone. And when I did a search on innovation storytelling, there was one company that claimed to do innovation storytelling. There were tons of people in the tech space doing storytelling, but none that owned that piece of real estate. And I was listening to the radio because I'm old, and it was Science Friday on NPR, and they had a woman on who had a YouTube channel called "I Make Robots That Don't Work." She was a woman on the autism spectrum who had decided that she had just gotten a job in engineering, and her job was to make robots, but she was terrified to present the robots and the things that she was working on in meetings to the rest of her company. And so she decided to start a YouTube channel just to eliminate her own fear. And every week she would invent a new robot that clearly wouldn't work just so she could go into work on Monday and talked about the robot that was working. So the first robot she invented was one that was supposed to brush your teeth for you. It was like one of those helmets where you can drink two beers at the same time with straws in your mouth. Have you seen those? So she hooked up one to like brush your teeth and one that held the toothpaste that would put toothpaste. You can see it on YouTube. She did this like this. This was easily 10, 15 years ago. She started brushing and the toothpaste is going everywhere. The toothbrush is hitting her in the eye. She's going blind. It's terrible. She said, I realized that I would be number one in my category, not for people who made exceptional robots, but for people who made robots that don't work. And I thought, wow, if I can be the queen of that, I can be a category leader. And I thought, oh my God, that's me. I create stories that do and do not work, right? And then I'll figure out which one works. And so I said, okay, that's going to be my lane. And many people came to me and said, why are you pigeonholing yourself? Why are you just doing that one thing? And I said, because I know how to tell a story about something that's never existed before, an innovation, and make it really cool and exciting to the listener to the point that in a large company, they would want to acquire it, fund it, and celebrate the people who made it. And so that is my tagline today is innovation storytellers. I help you get the resources, runway, and recognition you deserve for your breakthrough idea. Most innovators are great at innovating. They are awful at telling the story about it. I'm
Mhm.
here to help. And so that by carving down my niche about getting really clear about a story and then doing the very hard work of figuring out a framework that is 100% mine, that I can own, trademark, put a stamp on, write a book about, in progress, um, that I can say, this is it. And I can stand on that and be a thought leader on that, then that's where I can find a speaking career. If I'm just going to be a generalist storyteller, I
Mhm.
won't know how to find my market. And that's not to say that people who are not innovative seek me out for storytelling work and I will help them, but that's not the tip of the spear for me. It's innovative leaders, people who see themselves as being innovative because they want to make things move fast and they pay faster.
Okay. Well, cash flow is important.
That's what Method Man said. Just saying.
That's right. Absolutely. Great, great. So, now this has been great. I certainly have appreciated the information you've shared. Certainly, if there's any more questions, we'll open up for that. If not, we'll let Susan, I guess, close out with maybe three salient points that she may want to share. I know she's done a great job of telling her career and so forth, but there may be some things she wants to leave with us. But again, if there are any more questions, we'll open it up.
Okay, I always wanted to wait a minute because I don't sometimes feel like I'm monopolizing the question, so I was holding off for a moment. So I won't be accused of that, but I have a couple of things I do want to ask you. So I'll wait for a moment to see if anybody else jump in.
Well,
Sure.
Tracy looks like Tracy has her hand up.
And I'm so impressed you're all in your cars driving, doing stuff. Like, man, you're
Tracy,
busy
did you have a
people.
question or you just had your hands raised?
I do. Thank you. Susan, so lovely that you could be here with us today. Thank you very much for spending your time with us. Your background is so fascinating, and I think it's a blessing that our other Black NSA people could get to experience a little bit of you, since you're not technically the $1 million mastermind chief, so to speak, under Anne. But just for them to hear your global experiences and what you've done, and Susan is always jet setting. So when you try to keep up with Ann McNeil, and it's kind of like the Where's Waldo, we always wondered every week on the mastermind, where is Ann? And is she coming from a bus, a plane, a train?
A
Susan's the
cruise.
same way. Yes, a cruise. Susan's the same way. And so there's so much. I mean, we could be on this call for hours, Susan, and you would just continue to pour into us and give us nuggets. So I want to thank you for sharing your expertise, your talents, and time with us
Oh,
on
thank
behalf of the
you.
board.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's such an honor. I got to serve on the Black NSA board for 2 years, and I'm a 10-time returner to the $1 million mastermind because I can't think of a season where I don't want to think and grow rich. I always want to be growing rich. Don't the rest of us? Like, why would we ever stop wanting that? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Mm.
All right, Dr. Kenrick, if you have another
So
question.
yeah, just a couple of things here. First of all, thank you for coming and being on this. I was honored to be able to have a slight conversation with you before we started. Um, what I appreciated, Susan, aka Condom Lady, was was the
So
fact that
illustrious.
yeah, let's just call it, yeah, was the fact that you confirmed a few things that I had in my brain in reference to our earlier conversation about storytelling and things like that. You confirmed the thing that I wanted to ask you about was the carving your niche and the narrowing your perspective as to a certain section. I have a lot of information, and sometimes it feels as if I'm throwing everything but the kitchen sink at them. What was your method, or how did you come about narrowing that niche market in?
Um, Well, figuring out where my expertise was beforehand, like who are the people who really resonated with me? For me, they were nerds, right? These were like two tech guys who were developing software who didn't know how to communicate. Like their big problem was going, I've built, just graduated from MIT. I built this thing and I need the rest of the world to know about it, but I don't know how to talk about it in a way that matters to anybody else. And I was like, oh, I can do that. And frankly, I look back at my own life. I've always been a translator. My mom and dad were immigrants to the United States. I was doing their taxes for them by the time I was 12 or 13. I used to take the phone messages from my dad's company over the phone. They loved hearing a little 8-year-old girl, when they were ordering drill bits and carbide blades. And, my
Mm.
dad was a hardware salesman, right? So I was the one taking the orders over the phone. So for me, it was I've always dealt with really nerdy, nichey folk, and those are the people who liked me the best, as much as I liked working with them. So I'd always been a literal language translator for my mom and dad, and then I was translating concepts all the time, like, oh, I get that. Did you mean X? And then I would just say it, and they're like, yes, that's what I was trying to say.
Mm.
Like I was always that girl who figured out, like, yes, that's what I meant. Oh, you said it so much better. So many of my clients would be like, can you be our spokesperson? I was like, oh, that's what I do well. I didn't know that.
Mm.
And so that's where I figured out like who likes me, who do I like working with, and am I providing a value to those people? Um, that lasts for a long time. I mean, my clients were on retainer for years with me. So I was like, oh, this is ongoing value I'm providing that people really get a kick out of. Um, and find real value in. So
In your okay, I'm sorry. I'm
no, go
sorry.
ahead, please.
In your speaking, in speaking as we all speak, everything we say is brilliant. Everything we brilliant up to the 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. We don't want to, So, ne what I guess what I'm talking really is the narrowing down of your presentation in regards to how you present. We know your market. I'm the president of Nerd Nation. That's how I got this position I am. So,
There you go.
but but um, you have a lot to say. You can't say it all. So narrowing all that brilliance down is kind of like where I'm I need to focus on.
Um,
So
so there's
so
like, as I was figuring out what to share, right? Because there's a whole lot of stuff. And Jason, I don't know if you can make me like co-presenter or something. Um, in my storytelling work, well, first of all, I figured most of my talks are what, 45 minutes and 15-minute Q&A. Is that pretty much where you are?
pretty much yes.
Yeah, so I tried to figure out, by the way, my original talks were so jam-packed with stuff, I was overwhelming people. It was like a fire hose coming at people. And and now doing this for 10 years, the more I speak, the more I realize how much less they need rather than how much more they need. And I didn't know that for a long time. And um, meeting planners would tell me that was great. It was so much. I'm trying to figure out how my people are going to use that when they get back to their desk. And so I thought, okay, how could I get it down to a framework that people could actually take home and use, that I could create a handout that would live on people's desks for a while? And so I start off, there's something in design thinking called um, an empathy map. And I'm just going to share it with you. This is, um, it still says I can't share, Jason. I don't know if you can,
Yeah,
I think that might be a Teresa thing, right?
yeah, I don't have the capabilities right now.
Gotcha. Or even to be co-host?
Um, Give me 1 second. Let me try something.
So an empathy map asks you all these questions like what's really impacting my listeners' thinking at the moment? What are they seeing and hearing? What's impacting them from competitors? What is their fear and their aspirations? What do they really want? And so I started asking myself this question over and over again. What do my people really want? And two big questions it came down to. Number one, what is the agony that my listener is experiencing that I can help with? And I'm a New Yorker, so I ask the question, where is my listener bleeding from the neck? Right? It gets violent over here.
I
So,
got it.
and can I be the person who rushes in with the tourniquet that's going to save them or at least give them some relief? Right? So I thought, okay, my nerds are not getting the funding. They are not getting reasonable timelines to develop their innovation, and they are completely ignored. Most innovators, once they create something amazing, someone else takes credit for it, right? The CEO, sales and marketing, R&D, whomever, right? But my guys are getting left by the wayside as they're on to the next experiment that is currently failing. So when I offer them, when I promise them, my brand promises resources, runway, recognition, that I know that those are the three things that are murdering my client on a day-to-day basis at work. Those are the things that keep them up at night. Yeah, Illy, you're 100% right, especially women and folks of color. Absolutely. So that is my promise to them. By the time we finish, I'm going to help you get the resources, the runway, and the recognition you deserve. So ask that question, where's my listener bleeding from the neck? The other is, what do they really hope to gain? Now, sometimes the gain is, oh, none of them are saying, I want to be a better storyteller. Nobody comes into work and like, God, I'm really dying because I don't know how to tell a story. What they're getting is bad performance reviews. What they're getting is passed over for a raise or a promotion. And so the gain that I want to promise them is when you become a master storyteller, here's what opens up for you. All these things that you hope for. So I'm always asking the meeting planner tell me about the agony that's going on inside. What's happening in your meetings? Are people falling asleep? I got a call from GE Poland. They said our senior managers are putting our junior leaders to sleep in meetings. They are killing our meeting culture. Can you help? And I had never even thought of that, like that meetings were a place that my innovation storytelling could be helpful. But it turned out it was. I didn't know. In the middle of the pandemic, the pain and gain thing I thought was, how do we more effectively communicate on Zoom? It turned out the agony for the managers who were hiring me was disconnection. In the middle of COVID, people didn't know how to talk to each other. Like Zoom was this structured place where we talked about business, we got stuff done, but there was no cafeteria to go to. There was no place to take a coffee break. And so the storytelling work I was doing, I asked people to share very personal stories in our workshops over Zoom. And what meeting planners told me after was everyone feels so connected in a way that they hadn't before, because now living on Zoom, there's no space to tell the story of how I failed getting my driver's license 3 times, or what it was like when I went away to college and met my idiot roommate who destroyed my freshman year, right? Or any of those things that make us human. So I would say there's 2 things. Number one, what are the pain and the gain of my listener, right? So I can focus my content to meet those specific pains and gains. But then the follow-up conversation, right? Like those pools, when you drop a pebble in and you keep getting these concentric circles of value, is wow, I'm actually creating connection. I'm creating better communicators. I'm creating better leaders. I was just really hoping to get these guys funding for their cool project and a little bit more recognition around the board table. What I was actually creating were cohesive teams, were better communicating teams, teams who were able to move faster and stronger because they understood each other and they could trust one another because they knew their origin stories. So I didn't know that was a byproduct of what I was doing. That just came from deeper listening from the meeting planner.
Thank you.
Mm.
Well, excellent, excellent. This has been great. I certainly have learned a tremendous amount. Thank you, everyone, for your participation, for the questions. Thank you. Do you have a question, Illy?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm gonna go off camera because I'm in the car.
All
But
right.
oh my gosh, this was amazing, amazing,
Oh,
amazing. And I wasn't able to join on time. I hope it's being recorded. So I just got to say that. Secondly, um, the pivot was a great example. And then finally, what you shared about the finding their agony is going to like I think change how I do my. So I don't know if I had a question. More, it was more of a thank you. And if you see me reaching out, pretend like you know me. That's all.
you better is all I got to say. And by the way, that thing about the pain and the gain is actually way more influential while you're trying to close the deal, while you're talking to the prospect. So I learned to move this conversation up, not once I got the gig, but before I got the gig. So when I'm on the phone with someone who I'm pitching, I say, tell me what it's like right now. Tell me what's happening at the company that you decided to reach out to me, or that I'm calling you going, I saw this headline, et cetera. That must be really tough. And so someone will say, yeah, like let's say our friends at GE, right? Someone's putting someone else to sleep. And I go, what do you think that's really costing you?
Hmm.
From a culture perspective, from a dollar perspective. I had someone at AT&T tell me our sales team's inability to tell a good story means we're probably leaving $10 million on the table every year from not closing enterprise deals that really matter. And I said, wow, if I could solve that problem for you for just 1% of the cost of that $10 million, would that be worthwhile for you? 1% of that 10 million. Would that be helpful? And they're like, absolutely. I go, so maybe even 10% would be worthwhile. I go, great. So we could set up a contract for around $100,000, and then we could look at apportioning that, and I could be your storytelling coach for the sales team for the next 6 months. How does that sound? right? So I started figuring out what are the dollars and cents of the pain. And I get the prospect to tell me what it's costing them. So, what's the agony actually in dollars and cents? What's the agony in time lost? What's the agony in team members leaving because they're bored out of their mind listening to, Captain Senior White Guy who's just droning on for the first 20 minutes of every meeting, and you're losing your best junior leaders. What's that costing you? Yeah, let's stop the bleeding right now. I'm available next month. I can come in for like a 2-day workshop. Does that work for you? So I just moved up the agony conversation a whole lot earlier, because when you tap into it, people just want to talk about their illness.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
now they have a trusted person they can turn to for that. That's outside of the company. I would never tell my boss this, but let me tell you, people are telling me all the time that we lost that deal because so-and-so is so boring, or so-and-so didn't know how to hit the mark, or so-and-so overwhelmed them with all the features of the product that like the client didn't even care. They didn't even know how to make a decision at that point.
That makes a difference.
Yeah, really. Because they're paying for you to solve a problem, not to bring them a solution. They just want their problem to end. They could care less how. It could be me, it could be you, it could be anybody, but they
Okay.
just want their problem to go away. So I have to make sure I'm honing in on the problem.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Wow, this has been great. So each and every first Thursday of the month, we are here. So, Susan, did you have some closing remarks you wanted to share? If not, we'll wrap up. But if you had one or two closing remarks that you wanted to share, we'd be happy to hear them.
Okay, so I'm going to steal Ann McNeil's is find your niche to be rich, right? And even if I work across industries, but I work with people who consider themselves to be innovative, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter the industry, but if you are in my camp of people who want to make a move and make a move boldly, I'm your girl. Laggards, I don't need them, and they won't hire me anyway. So find your niche to really get it. That's what I've learned from Anne. Number two is the story is everything. So ask yourself, what is currently the story that you are telling your prospects about the problem you are solving for them? And can you get really clear about the pain and the gain that your customer wants out of what you have to offer in that precious 45 minutes? So are you really clear what you are leaving them with that will be the game changer for them? Are you clear about that? Because if you're not, they're not, and they don't know how to buy it. So make sure that whatever you're leaving them with at the end. And then the last piece I didn't get to, and I know it's 1 o'clock right on the dot, 4 big questions about your talk. What do you want them to remember? Step 1, when you're done talking.
Mm-hmm.
Step 2 is, what do you want them to feel? You have to be associated with an emotion. My emotion is confidence that I can tell a great story. I leave everyone feeling confident. What is the emotion you will leave people with? The next thing is, what do you need them to do? Well, hire me again, buy my book, whatever that may be. Get really clear about what the call to action is. And the last piece is, what do you want them to say to the next person of consequence when you're done speaking? So if someone says, oh, I saw you went to that event last night, what was that about? You have to precede them with that phrase so they can pass it on. That's virality. So what is the phrase that you are leaving people with? Like, oh, Dr. Kendrick, his talk was magic. It changed who I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever that thing is, make sure you're clear about what you want them to say to the next person of consequence when you're done speaking, and pre-program that.
All right.
So
Wow.
Susan, it's
Yeah.
funny that you bring that up. It's Tracy again. Because I'm looking, when I look for feedback after my keynotes, and I had a large one last week with the whole banking industry. And I was looking for testimonials, right? To do short testimonials, and they gave feedback. And these people are putting all these feeling words. And I'm like, I can't use this. Corporate wants to know ROI. And it's kind of funny that you're bringing up, it's good to make them feel or put down what they feel. But I'm like, I can't use that properly for testimonial on a CEO that wants to know what's the ROI.
Well, you that's your follow-up in the 2 and 3 weeks after, but the feeling is really important because we think we have to leave our feelings at the door when we come to work, and it really is the contrary. Feelings drive action, not data. So if you feel confident that you're able to execute, whatever it is that you're offering, they feel confident that means they will. And so driving the emotion is not a negative, but it's the follow-up 2 to 3 weeks later saying, tell me what's changed since I was in your office. That's what kept bringing me back to GE. Tell me what's changed. And they're like, oh my God, our meetings got so much better. Oh my God, I can now have a human conversation with my boss instead of a robot or a soldier, right? So many people in GE were former aviation folks in the Air Force and what have you. So getting them to change their language is helpful.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And on behalf of BlackNSA, thank you for our attendees for attending this monthly mentorship call. And thank you so much, Susan, for your words of wisdom, for your storytelling, for your ability to share how you've been successful in doing what you do, and much continued success in all your future endeavors.
Thank you. And reminder, no pantyhose needed in Africa, just an FYI.